Welcome to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein, talking about the evolutionary, the revolutionary, the inspiration and the perspiration, and those aha moments that change everything. And now, here's your host, Rich Goldstein.
Rich Goldstein here, host of the Innovations and Breakthroughs podcast, where I feature top leaders and the path they took to create change. Past guests include Rick Cesari, Ilko DeBear, and Howard Getson. This episode is brought to you by my company, Goldstein Patent Law, where we help you to protect your ideas and products. We've advised and obtained patents for thousands of companies over the past 26 years. So if you're a company that has software, a product, or a design you want protected, go to goldsteinpatentlaw.com, where there are amazing free resources for learning about the patent process. And you can email my team at welcome@goldsteinpc.com to explore if it's a match to work together. You could also check out the book I wrote for the American Bar Association that explains in plain English how patents work. It's called the ABA Consumer Guide to Obtaining a Patent. I have here today David Jitendranath. David is a digital transformation specialist. He helps small to mid-sized businesses scale using technology. He's known affectionately in the tech space as the 30-day app guy. Really appreciate you being here. Welcome, David.
Thank you for having me, Rich.
So let's talk a bit about innovation. I know you'd mentioned that there's really two types of innovation. Like, say more about that.
Yeah, definitely. So innovation is a buzzword in the technology space. Everybody uses it. It's really important to know, kind of categories of innovation or types of innovation. I'm not saying something new here. This is being promoted by the Harvard Business Review by a professor called Clayton Christensen. He just recently passed away. But he talks about two types of innovation. On the second type, there is a further delineation, which we'll talk about as we get into it. But the two types are sustained innovation and disruptive innovation. Now, let me quickly break the two down for you. Sustained innovation is basically about an incumbent who's a leader in the market space, making the product better, faster, and the motivation there is to drive profit margins. Being able to be more efficient, being able to deliver your services and products faster with more value, quicker value, right? So that's sustained innovation. The other type is the disruptive innovation. And the disruptive innovation is someone who comes in new and dismantles, what is existing, right?
Yeah.
I always like to think about this movie, The Matrix, where at the very end, Neo is literally, there's bullets coming at him and it's all slow motion. He just stops it and he's able to kind of,
pluck them out of the sky.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So that's kind of what I deem as a disruptive innovation, where the whole system sort of falls apart. By
like a new paradigm.
That's right. That's exactly right. And those are the two types of innovations that is, kind of, we can categorize any type of innovation as that.
And I think that's fascinating because, I have a bias, which I think is disruptive innovation. I didn't have this distinction before to realize it, but I guess imagine one way to look at it is that like mid to large companies are doing sustained innovation, where the startups and the small companies and the inventors, that's all generally disruptive innovation, where they're looking to change the way everyone looks at a certain type of industry or a certain product with a new type of solution. So it's just very interesting. Like when I think of innovation, I'm just thinking disruptive, and I guess there's this whole other category of sustained. But
I think both are important, right? Sustained helps these mid to bigger companies stay competitive. Otherwise, they're going to lose the game. Eventually, like if you look at IBM mainframe, they did lose the game to Apple and, personal PC products. And now, like you can even think of cloud sort of disrupting that, and, the mobile technology disrupting that too, right? The PC market. So eventually, it's a paradigm. It's a tech adoption paradigm, right? I think there's a book called Crossing the Chasm, which really explains it really nicely. There's this, innovators, visionaries, and then the early adopters, mainstream, and then you have the laggards. So eventually everybody goes through that cycle from, like innovation all the way to the laggards. But that's kind of the whole ecosystem of innovation.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. So there's that pattern. And then there's also the fact of the involvement of tech with businesses, which I think is fascinating. Is I know you'd said that essentially every business is a tech business.
That's right.
It just depends on the role that it plays in their business.
I would say every scalable business is a tech business. Okay, you can consider a mom and pop store. They're just happy, having a lifestyle business, going to their store and opening it up on, maybe a coffee shop, serving coffee to their customers. Now, think about a business that wants to scale and grow. They really have to adopt technology to the core, right? And that's where terms like digital transformation, innovation, how to drive profit margins, all of this comes into play.
Yeah, exactly. And so then, I'm curious, what's an example of what you would typically think of as a non-tech business, like how tech gets involved?
So I could talk about a non-tech business such as even a massage therapy, right, or a spa or a salon.
Right.
You may think, okay, you're providing a service. A chiropractor may be providing some service. It might be non-tech. However, now chiropractor gets entrepreneurial, or the spa salon owner gets entrepreneurial. I need growth. I know how to do this. I've run this successfully. Everybody looks up to me on how I run this spa or salon. Now he or she may think franchise operations. I can, create a, standard operating procedures for all my systems that I've put in place, things like that. So really any business I would argue, is scalable. No business is not. Even if you deliver physical products, even manufacturing, supply chain, right? When you deliver physical products to an end customer, all of this comes into play. I mean, that's exactly the reason you see Amazon investing so much in technology. I mean, you literally see how much they've grown and how they scale, and they continue to scale exponentially. That's exactly even though you can argue it's just an e-commerce website, look at the way they're utilizing technology to grow, right? So that's in our kind of everyday life. We see that right in front of our eyes.
Right. Got it. And so the technology could be a core part of the product, but eventually it has to be a part of how they engage with their customers and how they get the message out about what
that's right.
They do.
And I could also talk about marketing, how marketing is more and more becoming a tech play, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have analytics, which is an amazing tool on, we use frameworks such as customer journey mapping to see how a customer just looks at your website, and then slowly there's the funnel, right? They kind of come in, and then they consider different options before they buy the service and they become loyalty, like champions of your business or your products. How do you make them champions, right? How do you make them advocate for your product? Precisely deploying technology like AI, machine learning, and gathering the data and interpreting the data the right way, right? And it's actually, in a way, it gets a little creepy sometimes, but at the same time, your motive as a business entrepreneur is to deliver services and deliver value to your customers. Hopefully it's that, and it's not to spy on them. If that's really what you want to deliver, I think that means you are wanting to serve your customers better than any other competition you may have in that space.
Right. And so you're engineering how you engage with the customer to continually deliver value, and I guess learning from them, sometimes with AI, of like what they respond to and what they don't respond to, so that you could then optimize how you engage them and deliver value.
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in the lean model, right? Build, learn, and optimize.
Right.
So that's exactly what we do. Whether you're building a product or you're marketing an existing product or a service, that's exactly what everybody should do as an
Yeah,
entrepreneur.
absolutely. And I think the core part of that is just to launch, right? Is
Yep.
to ship. Like, even like Seth Godin would say, like, just put your stuff out there.
Right.
Just get it out there, and then you can you know consider the impact it's having. You could
Yeah.
optimize. You can learn. You can iterate.
Yeah, if I may say a little bit about the disruptive type of innovation, right? We talked a little bit about the sustained innovation. In the disruptive side, you really want to deliver. You talk about runway, how much runway you have for delivering the go to market for your product or service. You really want to put something out there first. Like sometimes entrepreneurs come to me and say, oh, we've got this big vision that's a 3-year plan. Wait a
Right.
minute. The world's moving so fast.
Right.
And that's, I mean, if you don't deliver an app in 30 days and launch and learn and gather the information so you can optimize, chances are that there's 3 million apps out there in the app store. You're not going to stand out, right?
Right.
How can we increase and improve the chances of the probability of your business succeeding? That's precisely what this lean model accomplishes.
Right, and I think another critical part of the lean model is that you should recognize the fact that what you think is the product right now will change, and like you need to pivot. Right, I think that's the central concept, is that it's inevitable that your company will pivot, but it's how well you survive the pivot that makes all the difference between the companies that make it and the ones that don't.
That's exactly right. Yeah, pivoting. I mean, being an entrepreneur, pivoting is key. The ability to be, building models or business models within your business, so you can pivot, learn, and pivot is the number one factor for success.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now what? I mean, you've worked on lots of different types of businesses.
That's right.
And I know currently you mentioned salons before, like in terms of like the way tech could be involved in business. I think that's one of your projects right now, right?
Yeah. So what we've seen is there's salon and spa is traditionally seen as a service industry. Okay, and now what is happening is that becomes a tech enabled industry. It's becoming more and more. We're seeing that we are making this podcast during this COVID sort of economy, right? How do they deliver their services? How do they stay compliant? How can they continue to adopt? Who knows what changes may happen post COVID, right? After everything goes back to normals, the back like how it was. So that's exactly what my product, what we are developing in that space is exactly addressing that. With we're doing certain things with AI, some contactless payment options, really making the customer journey efficient, and getting them to consider different options before they book that service. Really optimizing that whole experience. Sometimes people call this customer experience or the digital experience. that's really what we are building in this with this product. And I'm kind of taking my own medicine, right? I don't want to launch a big product that comes out and like, oh, it's going to change the spa salon world, and the franchise world. I'm actually taking the same medicine that I'm talking about with the lean paradigm, where I'm building and deploying and kind of giving it to these spa owners, testing out theories, seeing what works, which is absolutely important for any entrepreneur.
Yeah, and what's the big gap that you notice in that field that kind of calls for innovation?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest gap is, it's sort of a higher turnover from a resource standpoint, and employees come and go, staff is not very consistent. A lot of times people think that's just a training issue. If we address training, everything will, we can train people faster. But what we realize is, really the staff is just fed up of the day-to-day and the monotonous things that they do, right? People are very smart. And, when you tech enable them, it just makes them do smarter things, gives them the right tools to upsell, do better things for the business, right? And it's not just upselling, it's also about how better they can serve and customize their service. Really, that's the biggest impact, I would say, in that space, right? Especially working closely with the spa and salons that we're continuing to work with.
So just giving them the ability to customize their service.
Right. Yeah. And, we all talk about, customer experience. Obviously there's this big millennial folk they're all about experience. How do we deliver that? How do we deliver that customized experience? And that's what is going to make your business stand out. That's exactly what we're addressing with our tech.
Got it. And I guess a lot of times you strategize with businesses about exactly that, right?
That's right.
Like what's typically the starting point? I guess if you were working with a business, and I often wonder this about my own business too. It's like, how do you dive in? Like, do you dive in with like, what are your values? Do you dive in with messaging? Like, what's the starting point that you like to use to get to know?
That's a great question. So I usually start with some frameworks that are available, right? You always start with the customer journey mapping tool. It's free. It's out there. Anybody can search for it and find it, right? There's also the lean canvas. I always say, if you want to go do it yourself, you're more than welcome to do it with your team, right? Or, come to us, we will kind of help you through it, right? What happens is when you work through those, lean model canvases and business model canvases, you're going to ask certain questions within your leadership team that is going to significantly, every entrepreneur is a visionary, right? We all have a vision, and that's why you choose to become an entrepreneur instead of working for the man. Hopefully it's not just making money, right? So what happens is, with that type of a vision, you kind of always have to validate, that vision with reality. And these tools is where one should start. These are very proven tools. There is also, Google Ventures has provided a framework called Design Sprints. So Design Sprint is another tool that we deploy to start with. It's a 5-day kind of an intensive, used to do it in person, but obviously there are other ways to do it remotely as well. But really, there are I've given you 3 tools already that anybody can use to gain a good foothold to start on innovation.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, those are some fantastic tools, and I love that you mentioned the business model canvas. I actually been a fan of that for a while. Alex Osterwalder, he's got a book called Business Model Generation, and I actually went to a couple of his workshops. One in the States, and then in Berlin, they had like an advanced one, which was he was gathering together people who had innovated using the canvas to kind of bring it to the next level, which that was really cool. Maybe that was about 7 years ago.
Yeah.
But the thing I just want to mention about the business model canvas, which is cool, tying into this, you say everyone has a vision. What's very interesting is how you can have two founders of a company, and they think they have the same vision until they make it visual. They put it in one place. And I think one of the most fascinating things about a tool like the business model canvas, which by the way, it shows like the 9 different pieces of a business model, who your customer is, what customer segment, the type of value you're delivering them.
That's right.
The type of channels you use to deliver value, the revenue model, the cost model, etc. And so you put this all in one place. And then like a lot of times people use Post-it notes to put up their different notions of what should be in each spot. And then you get let's say two founders in a room, and they look at this, like where you've made their business model visual, and they realize that they've never actually seen it the same way at the same time before.
So true. So true. And each one is coming at it with their own vision of what the business should be. And this is like on paper, visually showing you, like right in front of you, what really, how, and it kind of is an alignment exercise too, don't you think? Like,
yeah, exactly. I mean, it gives them the ability to align about that, and
right,
and to maybe discuss, and like I said, a lot of times people use Post-it notes and something like that because they might switch it out. They might say, well, our customer segment is this, and this is our value proposition. Well, is it that exactly, or are we offering them something slightly different? And then they can get to tweak it and get in full alignment about it, and then share it with their whole team and say, this is what our business model is, and get everyone aligned on that.
Right. Yep, totally. Yep. And, another thing is, in the disruptive innovation space, sometimes you have to create a new market. When we talk about Uber, it sort of created a new market of these, Uber drivers who became like employees, or, whatever you want to call them. That it just created a new market, right? Where you don't own the cars, the company that is the biggest taxi service doesn't own any cars, right? So this type of an exercise can actually birth, in my opinion, new creation of markets. And we call it, if you want to call it business transformation or business model creation, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's cool about that too is that a lot of times people assume that there's a certain path for it. Like imagine that you come up with a new type of electric scooter. Like the obvious business model is like, well, we're going to sell them to consumers. But then maybe somebody says, oh, wait a second, well, what if we rent them? Like,
Right.
okay,
Exactly.
then maybe they're looking down the road of renting it. And then they're saying, well, maybe what if we actually spread them out in a city and we allow people to use them by the minute?
Right.
And they kind of further refine it, and they say, okay, so we'll have one customer segment that, the value we give them is like transportation from point to point, right? And then they say, well, okay, and then how are we going to deal with getting these things charged? And they say, okay, well, let's create a new customer segment. So we have someone else who is going to like make some money from picking these scooters up and charging them, and the value that we'll give them is the ability to make spare money through this. And so they can dynamically create a business model, by exploring this. And then the assumption of like, oh, well, we'll just be in the business of making and selling scooters goes out the window, and then there's some real innovation happening.
Exactly right. Yeah. I mean, this is literally a market creation, right? And absolutely. And that's extremely disruptive to existing industries that may be very dominant, right? And that, And really, that's the beauty of this innovation entrepreneurship, because a small guy can come in and dismantle the big system and the big enterprises that are out there, right? Um, we kind of look at IBM didn't create the iPhone or the Android phone, even though they had the mainframe. It's not like they didn't have the technology to do it. I mean, they kind of were so focused on mainframe. They just can't move at the speed of an innovator could move.
Right.
And
Exactly.
in a
So
way, it democratizes. It should be encouraging for all of us, right, that anybody could do this. And in a way, it democratizes. It's not like, no, you don't have to have a lot of wealth and things like that to dismantle something. But your innovation, if you are focused on innovation, if you drive it the right way, outcome, being outcome focused is another big, that could be another episode by itself. But outcome focused innovation and driving results through that is by itself. I think the barrier to entry is what I'm talking about, right? So that's no longer there.
yep, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, most of those barriers to entry have been removed.
That's right.
I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but one of the things I think about is like, 20 years ago, someone has an idea for a product. They want to get it out there. And it's like, okay, well, what magazines can we advertise in?
Right.
And, it's like even like the Topsy Tail. If you remember Topsy Tail, and she sold $1 billion worth of product.
Right.
But like it was like she took an ad in a magazine because that's what you do. Now you can make Facebook ads
That's
and
right.
set a budget of $10 a day and generate some clicks and see what happens.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you can quickly validate your solutions and your ideas and concepts very, very quickly. I mean, landing pages. There are so many marketing tools, right? Ads, landing pages. Really, a lot of you could do quick surveys. I mean, you don't even have to do a lot of focus groups or anything like that, right? I mean, there are so many ways to validate your idea, and kind of get to fruition on those ideas.
Oh, totally. I have friends at a company called PickFu. I had someone from the company on my podcast too, and that's what like they've built a company around validating ideas, about giving someone the ability to basically put out an idea and get people to vote on it.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities there. Hey, I want to ask you about IP. So like, what role do you feel that IP plays in innovation?
That's a great question. So IP, you definitely want to make when you gain traction, you definitely want to make your IP defensible, right? You want to be able to, really defend your territory so that, others don't copy. I'm a big proponent of IP. The only thing I would say is gain that traction and see what that sweet spot is, right? Because otherwise, it is sort of, I mean, I think lawyers can help you do that, like what is unique about your business, and they can evaluate and give you ideas on how to build that. And I think it's important to include them from the early stage as you build that, and that's a key part of innovation, right? Defensibility. So
Sometimes you have to have the right filter, though, when you listen
that's
to
right.
them. Like a
Right.
lot of lawyers
And I
can
think that's
give you very
where
pessimistic and and narrow-minded advice too. So you have to put the right filter on it for sure.
that's exactly right. A very sincere IP attorney can guide you the right way to see if there is something there or not, and how to develop and design that, right? So that's what I believe. I've personally sought advice and gained a lot of knowledge and gained, I worked with them. I continue to work with some attorneys in that space for sure. I'm a big proponent of that.
Okay, awesome. And Yeah. So, first of all, this was really awesome. If people want to learn more about you, get in touch with you, how'd they go about doing so?
A couple of ways. One is my email, david at mobile-di.com. The dash is a symbol. So mobile-d for David, I for Inc.com. And then my LinkedIn, David Jitendranath. And it starts with a Jiten, and then you'll see the rest pop up. I've got a very unique last name, so there's not many out there. So you'll find me, and I'm based in Denver. So those are two places you can contact me and reach out to me.
Got it. Yeah, unique name like Goldstein. There's not a lot out there. But cool. This was really awesome, and I'd love to have you back again to continue the conversation.
Sounds great. Rich, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed this conversation. Looking forward to having more.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web at innovationsandbreakthroughs.com, and we'll see you next time.